Okay, this is part two about how famine is an entirely man-made and entirely preventable disaster. In part one, I talked mostly about Gaza, and here I want to pivot and talk about Sudan and other countries. Fighting hunger, food justice, creating sustainable food chains. These are all things I've been interested in for a really long time. It's a big part of why I got into permaculture to begin with. We know that we can and do grow more than enough food to feed everybody, and that food distribution, and especially men in power who are determined to disrupt food distribution, is a large part of the reason why people do go hungry. There are natural disasters that mean people struggle with food, but famine is an entirely man-made construct. It is entirely preventable. Right now, three of the men who are the most responsible for famine around the world are Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and Benjamin Netanyahu. I would like to draw your attention to a piece that the United Nations put out in May of this year. But before I do that, I want to explain what a famine is in case you don't know. So there's multiple levels of food insecurity that people can experience. Right here in the United States, 47 million Americans struggle with food insecurity every day. But that's not a famine. A famine is the most extreme level of food insecurity, and certain criteria have to be met before a famine is declared. So all three of the conditions that must be occurring in order for a famine to be declared are: number one in 5 households in that area face extreme food shortages. Number two, more than 30% of the population of that area is acutely malnourished. And number three, at least 2 of every 10,000 people are dying of starvation daily. When a famine is declared, people are already dying. People are already starving to death. It is the latest stage in a hunger crisis. That's why it's so important that we try to get those needs met. We try to intervene with humanitarian aid way, way before it gets to that point. A big part of the reason that I was so outraged, I was shaking with anger when I read the story about how the Trump regime incinerated enough food rations to feed 1.5 million starving children for a week, is because there currently are little children starving in Gaza, in the Sudan, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Haiti. That food was wrapped up, packaged, ready to go and be distributed. It was close to its expiration date. The Trump regime, with Elon Musk's help, destroyed USAID. So they no longer had a place to deliver that food, no longer had a mechanism through which to deliver that food. It was bought and paid for by the United States government, ready to go to starving children, and they burned it instead. That's who Donald Trump is. That's who this regime is. They would rather incinerate enough food to feed 1.5 million starving children for a week. Food that our taxpayer dollars had already bought, shipped overseas. It was ready to go. They would rather see children starve to death while that food was lit on fire. That's who Trump is. That's who Elon Musk is. That's who the Republicans are. They are the kind of people who burn food while children starve. They're the kind of people who could save 1.5 million lives, and they choose not to. Okay, so to this piece from the United Nations from May of this year. It's the first time since 2017 that a famine has been declared anywhere on Earth. I'm sorry to say to you and to me and to our children who are living during this period of history, but we are in an era of democratic decline, in an era where we see autocrats rising and exercising power. And tyrants cause famine. Tyrants use the disruption of food intentionally to control populations, to commit genocides. Let's not forget that the Nazis during World War II used starvation as an intentional tactic. That was a strategy. Creating famines is a strategy that tyrants use. They use it to intentionally inflict suffering. They use it to intentionally control populations. They use it as an attempt to exterminate people groups. So let's look at Sudan. In the 20 months since the war between rival militaries erupted, 13 million Sudanese have been forcibly displaced. Over 30.4 million are in desperate need of humanitarian assistance, according to the UN. The inhabitants of the Zamzam camp, like others in the Darfur region, have once again been displaced as extreme violence permeates every corner of the country. In short, Sudan has quickly become one of the most severe food insecurity crises in human history. I appreciate so much the people who care deeply about what's happening in Palestine. I appreciate so much that people are moved to want to do something. I appreciate people who are connected to their humanity and cannot watch a government intentionally try to starve people to death, intentionally trying to eradicate an entire people group. And I know that it's so hard, especially for those of us in America right now, when we are watching our government trying to carry out an ethnic cleansing against brown people within our own borders. When we are all facing attacks from this regime that make us much less stable, have much less bandwidth to try to care for others because we're now much more preoccupied with our own survival. That's an intentional tactic of the Trump regime, right? They don't want you to have the bandwidth to help other people. They want you to be in constant survival mode because it's easier to control you that way. But even with that going on, even with there being the famine in Gaza as well, please understand that there are communities around the world who are in incredibly dire straits, almost entirely preventable, almost entirely because of conflict caused by men. If you have the time and bandwidth to advocate for the people of Gaza, I would really encourage you right now, as long as you are using your platforms to discuss famine, to discuss the injustices there, I really encourage you to take a few minutes and raise awareness for people that are starving elsewhere under similar circumstances. We live in a time when autocratic rulers, conflict, tyrants, man's inhumanity to man is at an all-time high, and mostly little kids are starving to death as a result, and it doesn't need to be this way. A UN report identified 36 countries and territories which have prolonged food crises, with 80% of their inhabitants facing high levels of food security every year since 2016. Hey, United States, we've been going through this for 6 months, and most of us are not actually food insecure yet. Could you imagine if you'd spent the last 9 years facing hunger on a daily basis, trying to raise your children, knowing that you don't have enough food to feed them and not being sure if they are going to make it through the year? 9 years, and in the US, we are 6 months in. All the more reason for us to be resisting a lot stronger, because it's going to get worse for us if we don't stop it. And there's no way that we can help these other people until we are in a more stable situation. So according to the ICP, the number of people experiencing catastrophic levels of food insecurity has doubled between 2023 and 2024. Right now, today, 38 million children under the age of 5 are experiencing acute severe malnutrition. It's important to note here that the UN report says numbers like this do not emerge randomly, nor do they emerge in a vacuum. No region is immune to the possibility of famine. No region is immune to a hunger crisis. With crises overlapping and interacting, eroding decades of development gains and leaving people unable to recover, we are facing a global crisis of hunger. The Secretary General of the United Nations emphasized that food insecurity at this level is more than a failure of systems, it is a failure of humanity. Okay, I know I said this was a 2-parter, but I think I'm actually going to make it a 3-parter. Please come back because I want to talk extensively about how Donald Trump and Elon Musk destroying USAID has made the problem in Sudan drastically worse.